Well, as you may already know, since we're based in Brussels, we decided to make a quick trip to the biggest German city that is closest to Belgium, Cologne. Before departure, we went on internet and on YouTube to find some insights about Cologne's urban design and architecture, and we have found nothing. Actually, very limited data, majorly about how tall the Cathedral of Cologne is, that it was bombed during the Second World War, and that the perfume Cologne was invented by a guy who lived there. But as you know, here in Stripping Architecture on this channel, we're not here to explore touristic sightseeings, but we would rather strip the visible architecture of the cities and explore the hidden urban design. Before diving deep into the urban tissue of Cologne, we'd just like to clarify that we don't have much knowledge about this city, and these are only our first impressions and sightseeings in Cologne. So let's move from the biggest cathedral in Brussels towards the biggest cathedral in Cologne. So the most impressive thing here in Cologne, the first impression that you get is that this over here is the main railway station. And the best part for the tourists, actually, but for many other people, is actually that the square, the railway station, is right next to the biggest cathedral of Cologne, which is the major marker of the city, and there is no questions about it, and you don't arrive in the city in some different kind of corner struggling to find the way to the center. Second thing that is most impressive right now here in Cologne is of course this cathedral. But it's so big, it's one of the biggest cathedrals in Europe and in the world maybe, but usually when we see this kind of big, imposing and monumental architecture and structures, usually around them they're surrounded by big square, which gives you the opportunity to view this beautiful monumentality from a distance. But right now here in Cologne, there is no big square, it's very limited square, and you're all the time viewing the cathedral like this, from close by angle. In addition to this, the large squares that usually frame these kind of imposing structures, instead on the front, in Cologne are located on the sides of the cathedral. In that way, you can only perceive the lateral facades from a distant point of view, while the impressive front facade remain a bit unscalable and mysterious, which creates an additional effect and illusion of grandiosity. And one of the best characteristics here in Cologne that we have found so interesting is this shops right on the side of the biggest cathedral over here. And as you can see, it's not for touristic purposes, but it's for cameras and different kind of objective and lenses. Quite useful, maybe so you can take better photos of the cathedral, we don't know, but you see, it's quite intriguing. Since we are speaking for shops, as we were moving away from the cathedral, next urban typology that really caught our attention were the porous fronts of the commercial displays. And we can see these columns of display rooms, of display windows, which are promoting the items, but also are keeping you a bit distance from the shop. Let's explore them. You see, you can come, here is the entrance, but at the same time, here you can see what's going on. You don't have to go inside, but maybe I'm just chilling around here to see what's going on. And I know there might be different kind of aspects to this. Maybe it's a little bit less social because you're timid to explore there, but on the other hand, why not to just see the items and see the prices of the items before you go inside? So I find this, we in Stripping Architecture, we find this interesting part commercial and part public space in the city. We should maybe have more of this, maybe not too much. And here is one of maybe my favorite example. So you see, it turns out that the store, the shop, it's spilling out on the public space. What is good, you can go and check the items over there already. It gives porosity of the space. It's nice that you can also come here and maybe observe some of the items. But I like the thing that you can fluctuate through the space, you can see what's going on, and if you want, you can enter and find that shoe over here that's decent price, or maybe that you're interested about it, or if not, you might just say like, oh my god, this place is not for me, and I can just walk away. Oh, now we also have this, it's a bit of a smaller version of it, but it's like a outdoor indoor gallery in between. But you can, what is nice, you can observe the displays of the store before you go inside. So you can have this little bit, okay, in the night times this is also closed, but you don't have to really go inside to see what's being offered. Definitely it's very obvious on the public space that there is something going on over here. And again, we have these displays, which usually we saw that at night time these shoes are standing inside, and this is open during the night hours, so you can see, even you can penetrate through the space at night time as well, but during the day they're taking them out and you can go in between and shop like while you're not being inside the shop. We have to add that despite the fact that commercial owners usually want to completely block off these kind of fronts and avoid people sheltering on front of the shops, in Cologne, during the night hours, some of these type of displays were not completely blocked and they were left half open, half closed. And the most impressive thing for us is that right now we're just standing maybe 5 minutes away from the downtown, from the city, and immediately you can spot residential architecture, which is a great sign. Finding and seeing that it's okay, that there is affordable, probably housing next to the very downtown of the city, which usually that's not the case in the other cities. If you can see on the balconies and in the windows over here and there, we can see that people who are living inside are just like average, some maybe stable middle class. And when we can see also the cars on the ground floor, they're not exotic or like super expensive. So this is a positive thing that we can see in Cologne, that the downtowns and the centers of the cities shouldn't be just for the rich ones. And then when we talk about the architecture of the general urban fabric in Cologne, quite noticeable is the fact that yes, there are different residential houses with decorative elements and specific style, but very often you just find this kind of blocks which are not too much stylish, but for sure you can see there is a good insulation, good windows, maybe some color, and that's it.
You can somehow realize that despite the loss of the historical urban tissue, the city is not suffering from a complex for revival of the demolished architecture. Yes, they try to prevent and resurrect wherever it is possible, but the accent is put on decent housing with suitable energetic efficiency. Despite the paved surface that dominates the standard street profile, which obviously indicates Cologne's ignorance for avoiding urban heat islands, here are some of the first impressions about the urban design that we've managed to gather during a 2-day visit.
An urban element that we find very important and very dear to us in stripping architecture, and that we find it here in Cologne, is this big offset from the river and from the coast of the river towards the space, towards the private zone. So far what we have seen is that on both sides there is a big distance until you get to the private zones or to the buildings. So there is a big surface, an area dedicated for the walkers and for enjoying the public, quality public spaces like this one over here, the river of Rhine. And right over there, for example, now there is another building. They elevated the ground floor completely so they can make a nice porosity from the street side towards the river side. And also what's impressive, you can see how far the street is, the boulevard. It's like maybe around 100 meters away. So this place over here, this distance that we have, it's very inviting, and even locals from Cologne, they say, if you have one thing to do something here when you come in Cologne during the spring or summertime, it's you have to get something to drink or to eat or to make a little picnic over here on the grass and observe the sunset that's going behind the church. So you see, this is in a certain way of a holy place for really leisure, slow time that should be appreciated by everyone. You see, we have to be careful what we're building next to the water elements. At this point, there is a little narrowing of the riverside. As you can see, it's a very small spot, and then they made it very genuinely, very intelligently how the long riverside to continue to be wide enough. But the moment you see these kind of buildings that are trying to get as close to the river, you have to know that there is some fishy investment going over here, or some capital investment or private investment trying to intrude into the public space and offer better deals for their private clients. In Cologne, you can often see how maybe we can say a quarter from the sidewalk is being dedicated for the cars, and then the rest remains for the pedestrians. At the same time, you have the car half parked on the street, half parked on the sidewalk, and in that way you have fine, you're squeezing the sidewalk a little bit, but you're having a bigger street that can be maybe with more fluent traffic, and at the same time maybe the car is taking some space of the pedestrians, but you're creating some regularized situation, you know, you're trying. So I don't know, good or bad, you can say it, but this we saw it as a common appearance in the urban design of Cologne. What we have over here, as you can see, there is a traffic light for pedestrians, and then there is a little bit improvisation of a crosswalk, but then there is the tram tracks here, and over the tram tracks there is no marking for the crosswalk, so it's a bit confusing where you're supposed to go. So this you can find it mostly on these big intersections in Cologne. These containers over here, to be honest, you cannot see them all around the city, but you can spot them on different corners. What I find interesting is that they're quite robust and bulky, not much stylish design, but as you can see, they're very durable, they're very heavy, and they're resistant to some kind of demolition or some deviant activities. And speaking of uniformity and trash cans or different kind of urban equipment, we have also these regular trash cans, which again you can see they're done with the function of being strong and solid, not with some specific style, to be easy to be cleaned and easy to be replaced. What we can see is that the streets in Cologne, they don't have hierarchy, like you can barely see what is a boulevard and what is a big street or smaller street or residential street, but at the same time somehow it makes sense, and you can feel that the city is trying to restore itself by not intensively densifying the urban fabric just by building high buildings, but it's more like trying to have some slower pace.
Something that we have found super interesting is that during the night hours from, let's say, 5 p.m. till 11 p.m, the city remains decently active. Not in a sense that there is a dynamic nightlife or centralized gathering, but you can notice a constant movement of people, especially around the river and the city center. While only 5 minutes away from the city center, the activity is being dramatically reduced and is so silent, like in a studio for recording music. We were actually amazed by the fact that the public spaces in the night hours are not significantly lit, but there were still people using them. One noticeable example was the constant flow of people over the Hohenzollern Bridge, which, you know, usually this kind of railway/pedestrian bridges in other cities can be very dodgy. And while we're speaking for the social aspects, we have to say that we have noticed a significant amount of people without shelter, usually dressed in decent everyday clothes and frequently checking the trash bins with the pocket lamps. Also, we must mention that we have noted how citizens of Cologne show no prejudice and they have some strange kind of sympathies for the people without home. Of course, this is our personal impression during 2 days visit. If someone knows a bit more about this, please let us know in the comments.
So, our final conclusion and summed up impression is that you kind of feel that the urban fabric of Cologne was interrupted by some dramatic event, which was the bombing during the World War II. However, as you can see on the illustration on your right, the fact that the city center is not arrogantly dominated by corporate buildings, that there is sort of a homogeneous urban fabric qua volumetry of the buildings, that you can actually see residential buildings and streets in close proximity of the downtown, the reality that you don't see extreme wealth gap, it gives you the impression that you are in a small and big town simultaneously. You kind of feel that the city is not yet finished and that there is no rush of filling up the city just with more and more buildings. And that was all for today. We hope you liked it. We see you in the next review for the next city and for the next urban design challenges. Subscribe, like and share this video, and see you as soon as possible next week actually. Bye bye.